Well, cool. I have Alex Boyd with me on the podcast. He is the CEO and founder of Aware. Thanks for jumping on, my friend.
Always a pleasure. It's always a
Yeah, we
good
were just
chat.
chatting about Costa Rica and all the adventures you've had down there. It's a great place. But where I wanted to start is there was a post I think you had. I think it was a month ago or so, and you were basically addressing that reach is down.
Yeah.
And I think it's clearly something that all of us have experienced at some level, but you had an interesting take on it that was a little bit different than I thought than most people are thinking about it. And you said that really the issue is that there's a whole offline set of events that are not happening as much as they should. The offline activities like DMs, I assume you mean, and other things like that. But I thought we could start there and just kind of get your take on that because you had some interesting data you shared. It's a nice graph that we can add to into this podcast as well. But you want to expand on that just a little bit more and your take there?
There's a ton there. It's so hard to be binary about it because at the high level, yes, the average reach per person creating is down, mostly because there are
Mm.
more people doing it, and the user growth of US based LinkedIn users, which is who most people are marketing to, is growing at like 1 to 2% a year. So there's just a supply and demand problem when it comes to average reach per person trying to get some of it.
Hmm.
But what we see in Aware is that there's a big outlier sample on either side. So there's people who are just like dropping like a rock, the ones who are burning out, who used to be big and are just like, for
Mm.
whatever reason, stopping. And then there are plenty of people who are 10 times their last year reach. And so there's just no one answer. And the spread is so wide. Like mine is up about 25% year over year. So it's up.
Hmm.
So within the big supply and demand sample, if you take the aggregate, and we don't know aggregate reach overall, like that's impossible to know unless you're LinkedIn. Um, but if you use engagement as a proxy, it's down about 25% on average. And so people in the Aware user base have just been making that up by posting 28% more on average, at least 2024, 2023, and they're gaining very slightly, but the average is lower for that reason.
Mm.
So lot of things going on, but just like broad supply and demand imbalance, where there's just more supply of people creating than there used to be. Demand is increasing more slowly, and then you have outliers in both sides. Plenty of examples in the middle. I mean, you have, you know, uh, people from 2018 who were huge that you just never hear of anymore, and you have Darren McKee, who few had heard of 2 years ago, and now everyone has. So like,
Mm.
have all the and Chris Walker hasn't posted on LinkedIn in a month and a half. So is it down? Is it up? I mean, this that for whom? And then what correlates with that? And then does it matter? Is the definition of an impression changed? It's a fun one with short form video impressions, but so many questions around it. Overall, down on average, plenty of outliers is the shortest way I can answer that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what people are looking at is they're looking at the amount of impressions that a typical post would get. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, I maybe was getting thousands or tens of thousands before. Now I'm getting maybe a few thousand. And so when they're
Yeah.
seeing that, they're saying, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Does my content suck? Do I need to do something differently? Is it the ad format? Can I do anything else? There was some interesting data I was looking up my notes here, but X global ad revenue, of course, when Elon took over, dropped about 46% back in 2023, which was huge.
Yeah.
And a lot of that money, well, we don't know exactly where all that ad revenue went. We do know that LinkedIn also saw a pretty big increase in ad revenue in
Right.
that same time period. So you can call that coincidence, who knows, or maybe regular growth. So that was interesting. And then you've also got, the introduction of thought leader ads, which was, I believe, about a year ago or so. And of
Yeah.
course, now LinkedIn allowing you to just boost posts. And so there's been clearly a push as they've realized, right? Well, wait a minute, we can actually monetize and make a lot more money off of all these content creators that want to increase their reach. And so, like
Yeah.
any good company does, they want to get more money of it. So that's going on as well. And then again, this is a lot here. Then you've got ChatGPT, which has been around for a couple of years now. And so all the LLMs have been making it a lot easier to make a lot of content a lot quicker. And so there's just more content flowing into the platform than there ever was before.
Right.
So I love your take on those elements too. Do you think that those are also, in your opinion, having a pretty big impact in terms of just reach, exposure, getting your content in front of the right audience, those types of things?
Yeah, it seemed from the best estimates I could find that LinkedIn ad revenue was their growth rate year over year was about like half higher than it was. So if they typically grow at 10, 11%, I think I saw it was like 14, 15 that
Something
they
like
were
that. Yeah.
forecasted to grow. So like it wasn't, a tidal wave, but I mean, in corporate terms, that's a good amount of
Yeah.
difference. And yes, like you said, even they've been incentivizing you to create content with AI. So you got everyone just like taking a tiny bit of reach to their crappy posts, you know,
Yeah.
because LinkedIn's going to show it to some people. Even if you get 100 impressions on average, that's 100. If many more people are getting 100, then it'll whittle away at the few who are getting thousands.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I've noticed there's a bigger spread these days, so the standard deviation is much bigger. Like the typical floor of how a post will do, at least for me, and is lower, and then some will get very big. Um, so rather than it being 10, 12, 15, 18, 9, 20, it's more like, you know, 2, 3, 5, 1, 800, 50,000, and there's back down. So there's this big spread of like it's more post by post rather
Yeah.
than creator by creator, um, which I think aligns with more of what I've been seeing, which is that LinkedIn's algorithm is becoming more discovery oriented. So unless is less who you follow and more what we think you'll like, regardless of who you follow. Because people always complain that um, who you follow seems to have nothing to do with it. It has like a little bit to do with it, but
Mm.
you really wish it was more to do with, I think, than it is because um, it's not that big of an effect. It's much more. You'll see much more stuff based on what you have dwelled on and saved
Mm.
than who you follow. So if you dwell on and save productivity carousels, you're going to see a crap ton more of those, regardless of who you follow. So you really have to vote with your mental attention span very, very judiciously if you want to see better stuff, or use a tool like Aware or something. But like if you're just using LinkedIn, you have to
Mm.
make sure you don't leave the page open on stuff you don't want to see more of because you will see more of it, which is kind of annoying.
It's a really interesting point. I want to come back to Aware on one point, but before we do, there was one thing that, again, you said in that post, and I think you said clearly people are making up for the loss of reach by
Yeah,
posting more.
yeah, it's
Are
true.
there some other things that you're saying that people are doing to either offline behaviors that they're doing, maybe that you don't see traditionally in the news feed, or things that they're doing in terms of really trying to up level the type of content they're creating? Maybe they're moving more into video based creative versus just text based post. Are you seeing anything like that that people are doing that is ending up in a positive result?
In a positive result, there's a lot of
Yeah,
people.
to increase
Things people
reach.
doing. Yeah, there's tons of negative things. So I see a lot of um, LinkedIn behavior being treated like a kid's soccer game, where how everyone just goes after the ball at once, and then the ball goes somewhere else, and then everyone goes after that. And that happened with short form video. For a while, everyone was like, "Oh my god, short form video! These impressions are nuts! Yeah, I got 4 million on a single post." And then they just kind of cut it and they changed the definition of what an impression was for that. And then, the ball went somewhere else. And I was like, well, where's the ball going?
Yeah.
So yes, what explains the things visible on the surface? Um, a lot of it is that like ground game, those offline things. Um, when somebody who doesn't particularly write very well posts something and people love it, it's often not because of how it was written or like the hook was like somehow expertly better. It was because people just like that guy and he's helped them out a bunch of times. Darren McKee's a fine writer, but he's not the best copywriter in the world. He's just helped a bunch of people out, you know? If you have served a ton of customers and they all sort of know you, you can kind of not say anything, but like if your post is reasonably good, they'll be like, oh, I know that person. So there's more brand familiarity with whoever it is. And I think people miss that because of the Justin Welchification, bless him, of LinkedIn. You have this idea circulating that if you just dial in your content matrix just precisely, and your hook is just a little bit better, and somehow it's all perfect. and you post every day and it's all perfect and you do 20 comments done, doesn't matter if they're crappy AI comments, you got the 20 comments done every hour, then somehow, like if your CTA is strong enough, people will buy from you. It's like, well, not necessarily. And you've missed the whole relationship building part of this because what are people doing? They're subconsciously, without really thinking about it, deciding whether to stop scrolling and do anything with their thumb on your post. And a
Right.
big part of that subconscious decision will be, do I know and or like you, regardless of how this particular post is written? Um, sure, there's a skill. I often help teach it on what can you do to introduce your stuff to people that don't know you. That's whole brand marketing thing. That's very valid, and I like doing it. I've done it for a while. Um, but if you miss the rest of the stuff, I would say things that former or current salespeople understand intuitively, then you get lost in this like over marketerized version of it that like you're doing all the right things and yet it's not working and you wonder why. And then I ask, how many people did you meet last week for, supportive conversations to help each other out? And you're like, oh, none. I've done that I've never done that. Okay, well, there you go. And what do I do in those conversations? I can't tell you like exactly. Here are a bunch of examples of what I've done offline to help people, but it's not all about that. The online results cannot purely be traced back to online inputs.
I like that point, and I think that the big thing that people underestimate is that there's this behavior by certain people out there that are either new to this or just want to get into it quickly. That it's just about churning out as much content as possible and getting it out of the masses, right? And just kind of basically putting it on autopilot.
Yeah.
And there's this whole entire thing. I mean, it's a social community, right? So, I mean, if you kind of just take a step back and think about it, I mean, ultimately, what you want to be doing is engaging with the people that are engaging with your posts or
Yeah.
engaging with people on their posts. And not just saying, I agree and that sounds great, but, maybe going deeper, starting a conversation about something, challenging an idea, asking a question. Or maybe someone's asking a question in their post and you're presenting a potential solution or something maybe they haven't thought about, right? And you're just free flowing, giving great value to someone based on your perspective and your experience. Or to your point, getting in the DMs and saying, hey, like, really liked what you said there. Like, what do you think about this or whatever it may be? It doesn't have to be a sales pitch or anything like that. You can just
Yeah.
purely say, like, I'm interested in what you're talking about and I want to talk about it a little bit more. And I think those are the types of activities that have to happen, to your point. Otherwise, you're just caught up in this nightmare of, well, I scheduled out 100 posts and used a bunch of chat GPT to do it. And like, that's great. But you kind of become detached from the content. You need to still be very much in it, doing it, looking at it, seeing what people are saying, seeing what the reactions are, and all those things. So it's a
Right.
tough balance, but
Yeah. I mean, the brand of a company or a person is what you have done lately. And then, sure, you can market it by talking about what you have done. But if you haven't done anything notable, then your brand marketing is just fluff, right? I mean,
exactly.
if you haven't done anything, you can create a character, a mascot, a color palette, and, pull pranks and put them on video. And you can do all sorts of stuff, but you haven't done anything lately, then it doesn't matter. And so it's why people who've done a lot and say little, and are bad writers get tons of attention because of what they have done.
Right.
And that's something I saw way too much with SaaS companies who haven't done much but want to do brand marketing. They're like, no, I can play this game too. It looks easy. You just do this, this, and this. Never
Yeah.
mind that we haven't, released a valuable feature and we haven't fixed those bugs. We haven't closed a bunch of customers, like all those things, right? So like you
Right.
haven't done business, but you want to play the brand marketing game because shortcut, but we all know how that ends.
Yeah. No. Usually not in a good direction, but
No.
I want to move to something. You and I have chatted about this before. I think I know where you stand, but there's clearly been an immense amount of contention with the comment to get access to content game
Yeah. Sure.
on LinkedIn, which for everyone, I mean, was of course was stolen by Instagram and Facebook, and has been a thing for many years.
Yeah.
And so anyway, now it's caught on over the last, it seems like, I don't know, year or so. And there's some people that are very against it and do not like it and think it's a really poor form of bad gated content, even saying gated content's better than what we're doing. And the usual reasons are because sometimes they're not getting the content that
Hmm.
they actually said they wanted, or there's long delays around it. Or when they do get it, a lot of times it's not meeting what they think is valuable based
Right.
upon whatever the headline of the hook was to get you into it. And so clearly, we know, all of us, or anyone who's been a creator, or anyone who's seen this type of thing, we all know this is purely a tactic to drive up engagement, right? That's what it's for. It drives up engagement because if LinkedIn interprets and sees more comments on a post, well, then they're going to get it into more people's hands, which is why a lot of times when you're just scrolling the news feed, the stuff that's gone the most viral is usually playing some game like that in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. But I'm curious. I mean, clearly, at some point, maybe LinkedIn will get smart and potentially demote some of these things. But what's your stance on it? I mean, is this an effective way, a good tactic that you think can work if done right, or do you stand on the side of this is really not something that is good for the brand long term? What's your thought?
I mean, I've done that twice in the last year and a half myself.
Yep.
Both times, not only did I hand deliver it to everyone who asked for it, but it was good to the point. The asset itself was good to the point of it being like, uh, blood, sweat, and tears to create it. Like, it took a lot of nights, a lot of many, many hours, a lot of custom research.
Mm,
It was easy to digest, and 0% AI written. Literally 0% in both cases.
mm,
And um, a lot of the comments I got, as you said, on that post were people saying like, I have been burned so many times by saying whatever they wanted me to say on some lead magnet, and then people said 80 to 90% of the time they don't even get it,
mm,
which like boggles my mind because if you have ever been in sales, you know that the whole point of this is to queue up those conversations and connections. Like, you want to open up the one-on-one.
mm,
And the over marketerizing of this, I think, has infected it. And now people think the point is to get engagement and to look big,
mm,
regardless of what happens. And then I just, after my post went up, I did one the next day just to see, be like, oh, I'll buy it and see how this goes. And I requested someone's $1 million sales playbook. You can
mm. Yep.
imagine, very well sold. This is like all the stuff you need to run a high power sales organization. And I was like, let's see. So it
I'm
was a
sure in
Notion
three in
doc.
three easy steps, right? Just do one,
Yeah,
two, three, and here's how you do it.
yeah, and it was a 6 page, 6 steps, not three, but a few more. It was a Notion doc, and then on each of the 6 pages was about 300 words of 100% ChatGPT generic, not even customized content.
Mm,
Clearly, it was like, you set a timer, you can make that thing in 4 minutes if you tried. To my 35, 55 hours put into each of the assets that I asked for a comment to get.
mm,
Um, and just for kicks, I also tried the opposite. So I tried releasing a very, very good asset that was handwritten, like a similar quality, but I just posted it with no gate. And it did fine, but maybe like a sixth as well as asking for a comment to get it.
mhm,
So now we come to the point of like, how do you price your value? And for an asset like that, I price it at least a comment, because I've learned that if I don't price it there, it doesn't deliver the value to me that it is merited for that.
mhm,
I very, very much like the idea of some sort of system, whether it's algorithmic on LinkedIn's end or just a rating of like a button, like this guy didn't deliver something, which obviously would be abused, but you'd have to figure out like, I don't know if they even have the bandwidth or the server side for this, but you know, when someone commented on a post fitting type of comment to get X asset, what percent of people who commented received some sort of response in a DM or comment. Now I realize I'm saying, hey, LinkedIn, the minimal amount of bandwidth you devote to this activity, devote much more. But like in theory, that would be how you'd measure it. And you'd
right.
identify the non-deliverers and be like, hey, you didn't do this. So you don't get to do that again. Like, this tactic doesn't work for you.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
oh,
a
you
great idea.
delivered?
We should
People like
petition
it?
LinkedIn. I think it's a
Yeah.
great idea to interrupt you. We should petition LinkedIn to do
Sure,
that.
yeah, that and have the sales navigator alerts be less than 14 hours delayed, but that's
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
one. Um, so it's as with anything else. I mean, anyone can pitch snake oil. Um,
Mhm.
And you've always been able to pitch snake oil because there's not been any real distinguishing factor until you get the product of snake oil versus olive oil. And
Mm.
so it's the same thing as the struggle through the ages of people selling a bum bag of goods. We just have uh, more, but not as much as we want,
Mm.
ability to identify the non-deliverers. So, like town to town in the old west, you couldn't really, unless that guy came back. There's no way of saying like that guy, you know, screw that guy because he went to the next town. And the rating systems, Uber drivers, you can rate them, right? You can rate the non-deliverers. So there's that. But there's no equivalent system for LinkedIn. There's no trust pilot for LinkedIn creators. I'm not saying that there should be one. I'm just saying that is the core of the issue is you need to do your own like identification, talking to people, offline community building, ground game of just like relationships based on integrity and value to know who's who and who's what. Because a lot of people can get a bunch of engagement, and LinkedIn has even said we're going to nuke that tactic. But why would you nuke a tactic? Doesn't totally make sense. You would just want to
Mm.
figure out who's abusing it, as with anything else. And it's just a game of the platforms trying to outgun the people abusing the platforms. It's the same thing in crypto and anti-money laundering. You
Has,
just
has
trying to
LinkedIn
outgun
actually
the
said that?
huh?
Has LinkedIn actually said that regarding
They
this
they
specific
told it
tactic?
to Richard Vanderblom, but then they
Really?
didn't do anything about it. Yeah, so they said we plan to. Well, you plan like we're going to. They made some sort of forward-looking statement to the effect of we're gonna make that less effective. I don't
Mm.
notice any difference personally. Maybe some difference, but not a ton. And that's okay. It just takes them a while. You got to get it right. Maybe it's just an iterative process. I get it, but like when people are complaining about it, you got to know, unfollow, and just commit to owning what's in your feed and who you follow and who you trust. And
Mm.
there's never been a substitute for that, as there is not now.
I agree. I think it's well said. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're not overselling what the content's actually going to do in terms of delivery, in terms of value, and again, value is subjective, right? What's valuable to you is not going to be the same amount of value to me, right? Let's say that you're a LinkedIn ads pro, right? And I write a nice basic kind of one-on-one LinkedIn ads thing. You might find a few parts interesting, but you're kind of like, yeah, I know this stuff. I mean, I've been doing it for 10 years. And so there's always going to be some level of subjectivity. And so it's always going to be impossible to please everyone. Right. But clearly, whatever you're putting in that post, it should at least meet those criteria, at least in the way that you're describing it without making it too dramatic. And to your point, I mean, if you give the asset to the person, then it really shouldn't be a big deal. And I don't know. I don't have a big issue with it. I think again, as long as you follow through with your promise, right? Then ultimately you're building trust and credibility with the audience. Now,
Yeah.
it would be easier if life was fair to, have that not be the case and just ungate the thing and just let it kind of go. But you also can look at it another way that, hey, I put a lot of good work in this, and I think it actually can help a lot of other people. And when people comment on it, that means that more other people like you can see it.
Hmm.
And so, there is a kind of altruistic way of thinking about it that way of saying, hey, like it's not like I'm just trying to game the algorithm here. It's like, hey, ultimately it's a great piece of content. Spend a lot of time on it. I think it'd be really valuable to a lot of other people. And I just want to make sure it gets the best chance of getting seen, and helping out as many people as you can. So I think some of it just comes back to that at the end of the day. But I don't know. Again, I think it's one of these things where you should really ultimately use it, at least my perspective. I don't know if you agree, but it's a thing you use every now and then. It is clearly not
Yeah.
something that you just over index on. And so I think there's a time and a place for having, the majority of your content certainly being ungated, unfiltered thoughts, your POV, helpful thoughts that you have from your experiences and what you're learning on a day to day basis. And then the occasional, hey, I put something together that's like really meaty. There's a lot of stuff here. Spent a lot of time putting it together. If you want to take a look at it, let me know.
Right. Exactly. I
So
mean, I was 10 months apart on each of mine. I don't even know if I'll get to another one within 10 months. Some people really abuse that tactic and they do it every few weeks. And then I don't know how well it works. There's a lot of people who get a lot of noise and then privately they confide. I haven't made any money from LinkedIn. I've gotten one lead in the last 4 years. Like they'll say stuff like that, and then it's like, oh yeah, it comes out. This was all for show.
let's go there.
So
Actually, that's a good segue. I was going to go somewhere else, but you mentioned something that was interesting. So, timeline to see quote unquote results.
Hmm.
And so I think there's probably more people that might listen to this that are not creating a whole lot of content. Because again, I think it is still a very small population, even though it seems like everyone's posting.
Hmm.
I remember the latest numbers. I don't know if they're out as a survey or something, maybe you know, but I know at one point it was like 1 to 2 or 3% or something like that of people are actually like weekly or daily posters on LinkedIn. So again, I think it's still, I'm sure, the minority. Maybe that number's increased a bit over the last
Yeah.
few years, but ultimately, I'm just kind of curious what you think about all those people and trying to think about when we're actually going to see results from our content. And so we ultimately know that when we start posting, we're not necessarily expecting it to be some type of direct response motion,
Yeah.
right? We know that there's going to be a timeline of building some credibility, putting ourselves out there, finding our words, ourselves, exactly what we want to say, how we want to present ourselves. So what expectations have you found in your experience, either personally or maybe just through others too, of like what that timeline looks like? I'm sure it's going to be different for everyone, but
Yeah.
what should people kind of set their expectations around?
It differs so much, and it's going to differ 100% based on the quality of the rest of the business and the brand in general.
Mm,
I used to answer this question like sometimes a few months, sometimes several months, sometimes a few weeks, but like the variation is 100% execution of not just the channel, but also the underlying business.
mm,
If you have some examples, right? You have uh, tons of credibility built up over a long career in a particular field. You rarely post anything, and when you do, it's very nondescript. Suddenly, you write something very well written, tour de force. Maybe a consultant wrote it for you, something like that. You're going to see results in literally an hour because you'll just have people coming out of the woodwork. Like you're just activating existing brand,
mhm,
doing well. Now, if you did not have that existing brand, did the same thing, then nothing would happen. And nothing would happen for literally years, like indefinitely, nothing would happen. You would never see results unless you had done something to deserve the brand that you then activate on LinkedIn.
mhm,
Um, so, okay, let's take a more typical example. You're a sort of average SaaS company who's like done some stuff, right? You've served some customers, you have some actual good testimonials that aren't, doctored and that represent real good work. You've been hiring, you may have raised a little bit, maybe you just sort of have some background in the space, and you execute at, let's call it, average quality. Um,
mhm,
you're that like several weeks to several months timeline is roughly accurate in terms of like something you can grab onto from I got a lead or I started from LinkedIn or I built it into a channel,
mhm.
something like that. So it's like it's all about who is seeing it, what they are seeing, and how well what they're seeing correlates to what you offer, the strength of your offer generally. Like all those things matter way more than the execution of your LinkedIn account. I would much rather have phenomenal brand doing a very average job of LinkedIn execution than poor brand doing a wonderful job of LinkedIn execution. The
Right.
former will do much better. So doing
Mm,
LinkedIn very well is ideally something you should only do if you are delivering and ready to deliver. Um, so if you're still figuring out, for example, your product market fit, I'd rather you post mediocrely once a week about the process of finding it than I would encourage you to put out daily custom carousels, infographics, and short form videos and like right execute at that sort of high production level. I would reserve that for when you're confident that just like running an ad campaign, you don't want to hit the gas super super hard until you're relatively confident that who you're
mm,
targeting with what message is going to resonate, and it is the same thing. So it's I would answer it in the same way that I would answer how long till an outbound campaign or an ad campaign would work.
mm,
I don't know who you're reaching with what message and how well does it correlate to your core value prop that you and your company are uniquely qualified to deliver on. Mouthful, but for
mm.
me it was like 6 weeks till I got our
Okay.
first 200K a year agency client from LinkedIn.
And
Have an email too.
would you say during that 6 weeks that you were pretty laser focused? Because I think you made a good point earlier that the content, clearly there's content for engagement's sake, right? And we all know what
Yeah.
that content looks like. And then there's content that is actually driving business types of results, right? Meaning that the content specific to the types of things that you could do. And it's not necessarily a sales pitch. It just means there's a clear dotted line back to whatever you're talking about to an ultimate service or product that is going to be there. But
Mhm.
during that 6 weeks, was that a lot of your focus, or would you say that you were a little bit all over the place in terms of the type of approach you had?
I was all over the place. I was posting generally about the topic, and I was posting about once a week back then.
Once a week. Wow.
Yeah.
So not much at all. Once a week
No.
over 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, my first few years of LinkedIn, I posted 1.3 times a week on average.
It's crazy.
And all that needed to happen, was for someone who had a reasonably good impression of me and my ability to, at that point, help them lead a sales team,
Mhm.
who saw that I was no longer full-time employed and therefore available for consulting,
Mm.
um, and who happened to have a need for someone who he thought I someone's shoes he thought I could fill. It was just that simple. It was like, becoming aware that Alex is doing this, that he's available, recalling that I liked my first impression of him, us having a need. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, what I said had to be like at least somewhat smart, but as long as what I said didn't damage his impression of me, it was that simple. It's
Mhm.
just getting in front of people with either the same or ideally a bit better of an impression that they already had of you. And yeah, if it's new and you're doing this long process of reaching new people, building affinity with them on a particular topic, then yes, there's more of a process there. And yeah, weeks to months, sometimes earlier, is what that takes. But if you have this network, people you already know, it doesn't take much. Um,
Mhm.
so remember that. I'd much rather you just start, put something reasonably good out there, um, and see what happens than to plan some elaborate campaign where you just have no idea, so you haven't tested.
I think that's. I mean, it's interesting. Same, similar way I started. Although I'd say it was even more all over the place potentially than you. I mean, we were talking about all sorts of things and Einstein quotes and just lots of just random unfiltered thoughts from my head three or
Yeah,
4 years ago. Because really, I think for me at the time, it was more about getting the muscle going of just practicing writing and getting it out there and being comfortable with that, and getting over any type of imposter syndrome and exactly what I wanted to say and all sorts of things.
hmm,
And then, of course, over time, it was like, okay, let's refine this a little bit. And so I think to your point about making a plan, I think sometimes these things. And it's maybe not realistic for all companies. Clearly, if you're a CEO of a major company, there has to be probably some type of a plan before you start speaking, right?
yeah,
Because there's going to be potential financial impact by whatever you say. But if you're not in that situation, then a lot of times it just makes sense to get started, right?
yeah,
Instead of making some massive plan, massive strategy, thinking about this in a very sales led type of way. I mean, let's just start talking, communicating with people, interacting. Just be yourself, right?
yeah,
And then over time, you'll figure out, okay, cool. Like I want to start talking about these things, and these are kind of the categories of content that I want to create more of. I've seen that these types of things people have a lot of interest around, and they have a clear dotted line back to my products. I'm going to spend some
yeah.
more time thinking about how I can add value around those topics versus maybe others that maybe are more niche or people aren't as interested in. And so I think that's what it's about in the beginning. It's just kind of getting started, right?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, some people just get it. When I was back in the day pitching LinkedIn sort of coaching done for you and generally like we'll do this for you services,
Mm,
I could always tell someone who saw the potential pot of gold at the end of the rainbow of like, I see how well some people are doing. I want that too. But at every turn, what it required of them, oh, you need to reflect on your core value proposition, maybe your narrative. Well, I don't think that's necessary. Well, okay, well, we can ghostwrite for you. I wouldn't want you. And then every turn, everything you need to do was like pulling teeth. Versus some people, you they get to you and they're like, I know I want to do this. This is what an organic, personal way for me to communicate with no ad spend directly to my market. I'm in. Just help me do it well. And those
mm,
two types are often what you see. And it comes down to the core psychographics of who's involved. It's, are they somebody who has had other life experiences that lead them to believe naturally that this is going to do good stuff? They
hmm
have a generally positive impression. This is going to do good stuff. They don't need specific, it's good to have metrics, but they don't, demand specific timelines, how many leads. because there's this underlying core belief that this is going to do good as long as we execute it well, right?
Mm,
And then some people, I want to do it for the money. How do I do it without changing my mind about anything? Like, well, you're going to suck
mhm.
at it pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like somebody who doesn't believe in SEO wants to try it for 2 months, and just because they want to conclude that they're right about it sucking, that you're going to self sabotage your own initiative faster than you can blink. Any marketing channel has this. Any combination of a channel and a CEO who doesn't like it has this same danger. Um, and there's no way around that without the underlying beliefs changing. That's not a fast process.
Well, I think the same thing can be said. I mean, it's all about expectations, right? If you make a ebook, I mean, the problem with a lot of ebooks and guides is sometimes they don't deliver,
Yeah,
ultimately because the end goal with them was, well, I want leads, and
yeah,
so you kind of gone into it already with a reasonable objective for the business, but unfortunately, it leads you down paths in the way that you write and create the content to do things that unfortunately aren't as valuable as they might be. And so I think you first need to take a step back from the results and say, all right, yeah, I know leads and pipeline and revenue, those types of things are important as business long run. But ultimately, right now, all I care about is making really good content that ultimately people are going to like, they're going to read, that's going to theoretically over time give my brand a lot more trust and credibility around the thing that I'm talking about. And so if we can do that first, the rest of it will usually take care of itself. You're
yeah.
not even going to need a lot of CTAs. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, rarely do I put any type of CTA of like book a call with OmniLab today at the end of a post. I mean, usually it's just a little bit inappropriate given the type of, medium, in my opinion. I think there's a time and a place for CTAs, clearly, if it's something, direct response related, but it's not like people are stupid, right? They know and they understand, they see
Right.
you, see your person, they go to your profile. If your profile is well organized, there's probably a link to your website there. There's probably a link up at the top in the headline. They can Google you, just by looking at your, the company name, just by going to the URL bar. And so
Yeah.
I think some of these things become, again, it kind of just is like this common misconception with, I want demos. All right, well, I need to run an ad campaign and tell everyone, do you want a demo? And it's
Not
like,
necessarily.
not necessarily. You could do that. And there are campaigns that run that way, and too many, unfortunately. But you can also just purely say, like, hey, here's content, here's something valuable, here's messaging and core stuff we do around problems that you have. And ultimately, again, a lot of those things will correct and solve themselves because no one wants to be pitched. No one wants to be have someone in their face trying to go after them hard. And so we all know that. And so just it's got to be a give type of approach before there's any ask.
Yeah,
But
it does. The
yeah,
obvious point is something that comes up a lot of just like, what kind of CTA should I put? I think it's pretty clear that you are here to sell something because it's what your whole thing is about. It's what sort of everyone's at some level doing. I don't
exactly.
think you need to remind people. You insult their intelligence and your own by putting too many CTAs all over the place.
That
And then
makes
with
sense.
the ebook thing, some companies put out stuff and you can tell it was a labor of love. And some
Mm,
companies you can tell it was not. And the difference is it would take a long time to describe, but you could, and it would be very annoying. But like we all know it when we see it, right? Was it a labor
yes.
of love or not? Um, and when it wasn't, people feel sort of had. They feel like you're here to take from them. They feel used. I think when you make your market feel used, they don't like you very much, and they don't really want to take the demo. And if they do, they're gonna have their camera off, be eating lunch, and just sort of like take it but not care about it. Every
Right.
step of the process thereafter will be more annoying. And because we've both been in sales, we can feel that. We can feel a prospect who is like, I do want to hear you out on some level, but also I kind of hate a lot about your brand. And so I'm going to just give you hell through it. Like, oh, why is
Right.
the sales cycle longer?
You
Trace it
wonder
back to the
why.
source. Yeah, you have to.
Exactly. I want to move to something before we wrap up here. We can't avoid the topic of AI clearly, and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that. And I think there's some cool stuff that you guys are doing in Aware as well to do this and make it easier. But I think that everyone generally, and at least this is my stance, and I'd be curious of yours. But I think clearly everyone is AI plus human, right? And I think that's honestly not a new message. It's been something that's been going around since the Industrial Revolution. I mean, back when farmers were getting replaced by robots, right? And so there's always fear, right? Because it moves very quickly. then people can lose their jobs, and people aren't as needed as much. But as it relates to content, we're not talking about a mass exodus of jobs right now just because of content creators per se just yet. But where should AI really be used to help write content, and where shouldn't it be used? Where's the balance in your opinion between this of staying close enough to the content so it's your voice, what you believe, exercising the muscle of writing versus trying to be efficient and
Hmm.
trying to get out content quicker because we're all busy people. There's lots of stuff we have on our plate. So
Yeah.
what's that balance look like for you?
As someone who's had a professional writing practice for a very long time, I can feel the difference between I'm writing this because it's worth saying again, just because I know repetition is helpful. But I've typed these words in different ways so many times that I'm just kind of going through the motions,
Hmm.
versus when I am writing to develop and clarify my own thoughts. Those are
Hmm.
two very different activities. The type of writing to develop and clarify your own thoughts is extremely important. It's very enriching, rewarding, and trying to have AI help you with it is the wrong thing entirely. It misses the point. For at least the drafting of content. If you're asking AI to help you think through a topic, well then great. That's a different activity. But as far as AI writing the publishable content for you, don't do it in cases where your intent is to think better. A lot of people don't know that often writing is to think better. They just see it as like only to publish, and there's something missing there. And for those people, I encourage you to get more into writing and the thought process development of what it's for anyway, like the professional writing practice of those who are just doing it to kind of reflect and get smarter and be better, and just in the way that education makes you ideally better, smarter, and more reflective as a person if it's done in the right way. So again, contrast that with uh, what I would call content creation, which is to take a core thesis or message or question or something and just sort of make it digestible by other people. That's a fine use case for AI if it's very well implemented and you can meet certain tests like um, does the writing sound like what you would write or what you aspire to write if you were a better writer? We can debate that all day. Do you stand behind the output regardless of how it was created? Does it represent your not just your point of view, but your tone? If it's in a medium, it's going under your name. It should be trackable back to you in that way. Um, and then is it actually more efficient than you writing it? There's a lot of people who use AI to write comments that are much slower per AI comment than
Hmm.
I am with no AI, because
Hmm.
I can do it in 20 seconds and they're sitting there clicking the generate button 3 times and mulling it over, and they've spent 2 minutes with AI. I'm like, you've lost the thread when you've
Yeah.
done that, because if the purpose was to make you more efficient, now you're just tinkering. I love
Hmm.
tinkering as much as the next guy, but if you get lost in tinkering to the point where you're just like you're becoming one of those people, and there are many of these days where they have this like inner desperation to use LLMs and AI and just sort of like to avoid feeling left behind. And so they, into the wee hours of the night, they're configuring and talking with ChatGPT and getting lost, and like it's becoming a friend of theirs. This is the same kind of underlying urge where when that initial GPT-3 product that was like supposed to be your friend came out, Replica, and people started
Hmm.
like developing intimate relationships with it, it's the same underlying issue that I think you need to watch for and avoid. So if you're becoming like getting lost in it through some like technological intimacy, then you've lost the thread. And this is very common. Just people who are just like, AI is so amazing. This is like not just the next big thing. I'm just enamored with it. And yet, when I look at the business workflow, you spent 2 minutes writing a comment. Like somehow you've gotten off the trail. Get back on the trail. Like use it when you would otherwise just take longer. And maybe you're a little bit more tired than usual. You want to address the same topic you've already addressed. You don't really feel like typing as much. Great. The aware, fine tuned AI that's literally fine tuned on your past up to 200 posts. It's a great way of getting a good draft that you can then tweak if you are just needing like a lower effort and lower intensity way of getting
Hmm.
that same post up and you're not using it as clarifying your own thoughts and developing your internal narrative. That's a mouthful, but it's a very different mentality. That's why we waited so long to produce a AI text generation feature at all, is because we're just inundated with crap out there, and like, God, we don't want to blend in with this stuff where it's just click button, make post, feel good about yourself for a moment, and then burn out when you realize it doesn't work because it's generic and doesn't represent you, and all those other things. So long story, but that's our kind of like, I think, well reflected take on AI for generating text in B2B marketing.
Well, I hadn't thought about the point you made. I like it, by the way. I think it's great. But saying the same thing and then writing to clarify thoughts. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's a good distinction, the way to think about it. I mean, the only things that I would add to that is that I think certainly for me, when I'm using, whether it be Claude or ChatGPT or some combination, we've got some AI based workflows too we built internally, at Omni. But ultimately it kind of comes down to like, what do I generally want to communicate in this message? And so usually I'll draft out a very rough version of like what I generally want to say, and then I'll try to get that refined by AI to expand on a little bit, maybe shift some words around, etc. Or I might say, hey, what are some perspectives and angles I'm not considering here? What are some things that might be interesting to consider as examples on this? And that just helps kind of bring some ideas forward that like, oh yeah, it's a good idea, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Or hey, that is an interesting take. I've got a take on that myself, and then I might write a couple words in. I think things like that. But I think that what people are tired of is like let's define demand gen, or let's define lead gen versus demand gen, or let's recycle something that like we're just all kind of sick of to a degree. I think what everyone really wants is they just want unique insights with real data on what actually is happening. They want real stories of stuff that either worked or didn't work, and they want examples. It's like, hey, you should do brand marketing. You should. It's really important to increase mental availability. It's really important to do all these things. Okay, those are all good things to say, and in theory, I agree with all those. But show me an example of someone doing it well. Show me an example of how they do it and break it down in a template. You know, show me the steps it takes to create something that's great in terms of an ad or a good SEO page or a good blog or a good post or whatever it may be. And I think if you can get to those types of things, that's where the value really comes out. Because I mean, I think so little content. I mean, there's probably a 1%ers of content that I see out there that are truly using like, and it doesn't have to be every single piece, right? But there's not enough content out there where it's truly using something unique, in terms of insights. And again, like there's Hockey Sack Labs, there's Dream Data's lab side of it. There could be just experiments you've run. There's like forgetting the guy's name right now, but he's been releasing all these really interesting experiments in terms of A/B testing right now, and I think it's just interesting stuff, right? Versus he could just talk
Yeah.
about A/B testing as a practice, which most people generally know the mechanics of it at a high level,
Yeah.
and then they're saying like, hey, this pricing page worked better than this one. This is why. This is what I learned from it. Oh wow, that's interesting. Maybe there's a learning from that. So.
Yeah. I think
Um,
the underlying, all of this, I think, comes back to how we are hardwired and we can't upgrade that hardware. Um, and we're hardwired for skepticism in this context. Anytime we're being marketed to, we're skeptical. That's the natural inclination of defense. And when you say something like you should do brand marketing, the skepticism subconsciously is anyone can say that. So I don't think anything good about you because you said that, because anyone can say that. If you explain, however, examples like you were saying about how to do it well, that where it was done well, not anyone can say that, and so something has actually been learned and taught, and values have been exchanged. I talked about this recently too, with the analogy I think about for selling and sales in general is like, are you going to take my sheep? And if you come with a generic message that doesn't prove you know the topic, then people think you're just here to take their sheep. You're here in the town saying words that are designed to lower their guard and has the opposite effect. Your guard goes back up, and they're like, nope, you're going to take my sheep. Go away from my flock. You get out of town. Bye. And the only
Totally.
way to get around that with just words is to speak specifically. You have to prove, show, not tell, that you can do it.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, exactly. I think you said it well. I think it's a good closing line. I know I kept you right up until the top of the hour here, man, but love having you on and chatting a bit. If people want to find you or learn more about Aware or anything related to that, what can they do? Where do they go?
LinkedIn's a great place. I think if you type in Alex Boyd in LinkedIn, I should come up first, depending on who you're connected to. But that's the best place for me to direct traffic on whatever we're working on.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, thanks for jumping on for a bit, and we'll have to do this again here shortly.
Thank you.
Our big guy. We'll see you. All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of OmniLab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of OmniLab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode, or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website. It's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.